guys, Luna here, and yes, I'm in the same dress, and this is the same time that I have just videoed the Weight of Small Things review. So, I am now reviewing, as you can see from the title, a book called Dear Laura. This book is essentially a horror and gore and crime kind of book, and follows a girl called Laura from the age of 9 years old upwards until her adulthood. I gave this book 5 stars, and I'll explain that in a little while. So first of all, again, I'm going to be referring back to my phone because my blog post is on here and my laptop is being used by beasts at the moment. So this book was one that was recommended to me by a fellow booktuber and lovely girl called Read by Beth. She is awesome. I found her recently and we've become friends, and she's just amazing. So I will link her blog, booktube and Instagram and stuff below. So she made a little challenge called Women in Horror Weekend, and basically you read horrors written by female authors, which I absolutely love. Yeah, it was a great way to spend the weekend, and basically just gave you an excuse to discover more books by female authors, which I think is very empowering for women, and we definitely need more women to be embraced as female horror authors, because a lot of horror authors are men and it's mainly dominated by men, such as Stephen King. So yes. So basically I had planned to read 2 or 3 books over the weekend. It was from the Friday to the Monday, which is 4 days of reading. Now, I am the kind of person who could read a book like this in a day or so. So I was really sort of, you know, encouraged to read more over that weekend, but unfortunately my mum was taken into hospital on the Saturday, and it basically completely shook the whole weekend. And yeah, I was in charge of the 3 kids almost alone, and it was just a very difficult weekend, and it meant that basically I couldn't dedicate my time to reading. So I basically read Dear Laura first, which is a very small book. Yep, I've got it on my Amazon Fire. Yes, so it's a very short book. I think, if I'm correct, it's just around 120 pages long, which is extremely short. And yeah, I just thought I'm going to try and read this, and then I will move on to the next. So my plans were Dear Laura and Tend of the Flesh, I think it's called. So I started off with this, and I ended up reading this in a day. As you can see, this is the front cover. It's quite enticing, and yeah, it says Bram Stoker Awards nominee Gemma Amor, and it's Dear Laura. So I am going to refer back to my blog post again, just so that I stay on topic. So blah 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 blah. So yeah, I managed to read this in a day, and then I moved on to my next read. So it's certainly enticing and gets you on edge immediately. It's a very fast-paced book, and there's a lot of time jumps as well. For a short story, it's definitely bold, and to be honest, I think it's brilliant. I think it's a really good read. It follows the main protagonist, Laura, who we follow from age 9 upward until her adulthood, as I said earlier. So I have just realised that I said we follow Laura since she was 9 years old, but that is not true. That is not true. I think she was 12 or 13. I'm getting mixed up with my last book review. That's what's going on here. So no, she was, I believe, 12 or 13 years old, and she was in school. She had her best friend who just became her boyfriend essentially, and they were on their way to school one day when Laura forgot something. So she went back, and when she got back, her best friend was talking to a stranger, and before she could even approach her friend properly, he got into the van with this stranger, and she never saw him again. So the story goes on from that point, and every year on that day, because it was her birthday, every single year on that day, she gets a letter from this stranger, this mystery admirer, and basically the person who sends her these letters claims to be the person who took her best friend. And so basically she keeps the letters a secret, and it goes from there. I won't say any more because that is the gist of the story. That's all you need to know. But put it this way, again, I would probably put a trigger on this. It involves grooming, you know, rape, things like that, self-harm. Yeah, so it's quite gory, and it's quite to the point. So yeah, that is sort of a brief sort of sum up of the storyline. So yeah, Laura's struggles are very agonising, and she takes you along her journey of horror, mental health, struggles, terror, relationships, and overall highs and lows in her resilience. I do not know what I would do in her situation. It is absolutely awful, but it makes a very good read. It's a very fast-paced story, but it definitely packs a punch. The anticipation towards the end is immense, and this is the kind of thing that I really enjoy, because if an author can build up the story and make you really excited for the end, then you know that they're doing a good job, and then obviously following through with that ending is another story. So yeah, the anticipation towards the end is immense, and you almost start to put yourself in Laura's shoes, asking yourself what you would do in that situation, and you sort of think about what Laura will decide to do, because you go on this journey where she doesn't even know what she's going to do. She's got a lot of different mindsets, a lot of different thoughts about the situation and what she'll do when she comes to face with this person, if she ever does, if the person really is who he says he is. So yeah, it really does keep you on your toes, and in some parts it can get quite gory, and the details aren't exactly subtle. You know, if the writer's going to say something, she's just going to say it, so I love that. So you see the front cover, and that really does say to you that something's going to get messy, and my god, it really does. It leaves you feeling sickened, but in a way that makes you want to keep reading. And the same with a film. It's the kind of thing where it's like, oh my god, that's awful, and I kind of don't want to look, but then I also kind of do want to look. And I really like that. I really like that. So yeah, overall I really enjoyed this book. It's short and simple, but well written and fits in the genre. So if you're a horror or gore fan, then this one might be good for you. I also did my Goodreads reviews of this, and again, yeah, 5 stars. It's a small but mighty read is how I explained it. Something that I said about this book is basically there are so little amount of characters, and it could make you put off by this because it is predominantly focused around the eye, like through the eyes of our main protagonist, Laura, who is essentially the star of the show. You basically go through this whole story on her and her alone, which for some people can be quite but I really like it. It's similar to Eleanor Oliphant. There are quite few characters in this book, but it really is well written without getting boring as well. Every chapter keeps you on edge, makes you want to keep reading it to find out the end, and it's one of those books where you aren't sure what could possibly happen to close the story, which makes you feel a sense of anxiety and anticipation, wondering what the route will take, which I really like, because although it's a very short book, although it's a very to the point story, it's a very one-way story, this keeps happening and this is how Laura feels. It kind of, you still don't know what the ending's going to be, which I think is really powerful for such a simple story, when it gives you so many pathways of what Laura could do, what might happen, what you would do, what's realistic, what isn't realistic, and I think that that's really, really powerful. I keep thinking about the story and the hurt that the characters must feel, It's a very real kind of case that the main character Laura is facing, and it actually unfortunately happens quite a lot to a lot of people all around the world behind closed doors. And it's quite agony inducing, but the strength and resilience of Laura really does come across. And yeah, it kind of reminds me of those I Survived stories where a person's been through a horrific ordeal, yet they've come out the other end. It doesn't end amazingly positive, because what happens is quite big and unfortunately there are consequences, but it's a very realistic ending and one that I really appreciate. Actually, I can imagine seeing this sort of case in real life, and I really like what she did with it. I really like what she did with it, and if I'm honest, I definitely read more books by her, especially if they were short stories, because there's something about a short book that is more enticing because there is such a stripped back story. There aren't major intertwining details, there aren't tons of characters, and I think that to write a short book and make it amazing is probably harder than writing a longer book, because you have to get all of the information that is absolutely necessary and jam pack it into something shorter, yet still give enough information that the reader is hooked and the reader wants to read on. So yeah, dear Laura, 5 stars in my opinion for such a short book. Some people might have very different opinions based on this, and I'm really looking forward to see what Read by Beth thinks. I always get anxious when I read the same book as someone else, because if I say, oh my god, it's amazing, and they go, actually that was a bit shit, and I'm like, oh, but do you know what, we all have different minds and our brains like different things. The same with films, the same with food, the same with clothes, the same with anything. So yeah, I really like this book. I would recommend it to other people. I'm going to get my mum to read this and see what she thinks, and I might even do a joint review with her at some point on here as well. The same goes for other books as well that I'm reading. I really find it interesting if my mum and I would do little reviews together, just to sort of bounce back on what we think about them. So yeah, I hope that you've enjoyed this video. Again, if you have a different opinion, I would love to hear it in the comments, and if you've liked it, I would also really appreciate a nice thumbs up, maybe even a subscribe or a share. So it would really help my channel grow, and yeah, I absolutely love making these videos for you. No matter how many people view this, like this, comment or share, I really enjoy making videos like this, and I have really enjoyed doing book reviews. If there are any books that you would like me to read and review, then feel free to pop them in the comments. And yeah, I'll also have some different videos either side here, where my hands are right now, and also a little subscribe in the middle here. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and thank you so much. Bye!